Dutch court ruling, a game changer for software licensing. VMware and parent company Broadcom must continue to provide support to the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, Rijkswaterstaat, while the agency migrates away from VMware products over the next 2 years, a Dutch court has ordered. The Dutch verdict represents a formal rebuke of how enterprise software monetization has decoupled from operational continuity, said Sanchit Gogia, chief analyst and CEO at Greyhound Research. Vendors that revoke support for perpetual licenses without reasonable transition mechanisms risk creating a contractual choke point. This ruling validates the rising concern among CIOs that vendor strategy can no longer operate in a vacuum, Gogia said. Whether in the form of legal injunctions, class action suits, or regulatory probes, buyer-led resistance to coercive licensing tactics is becoming structured, public, and repeatable. The broader implications extend beyond individual disputes. Gogia argued that the Dutch ruling is reshaping the boundaries of acceptable vendor conduct as governments and large enterprises become more vocal about license continuity. For customers in regulated or public service environments, the stakes extend far beyond financial impact. They touch on risk, compliance, and service reliability, he said. Gogia sees vendors facing a binary choice: retrofit their models to respect legacy contractual expectations, or risk building their future revenue on top of contested trust. As quoted in NetworkWorld.com, in an article authored by Gianna Swain published on July 1, 2025. Beyond the media quote, our view in full. Pressed for time? You can focus solely on the Greyhound Flashpoints that follow. Each one distills the full analysis into a sharp, executive-ready takeaway, combining our official standpoint, validated through Pulse data from ongoing CXO trackers, and grounded in field notes from real-world advisory engagements. Dutch court rebuke may force global reset of enterprise software licensing norms. Greyhound Flashpoint, a precedent-setting Dutch court ruling ordering continued support for perpetual software licenses, is reshaping the boundaries of acceptable vendor conduct in enterprise IT. Per Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025, 58% of global CIOs now cite licensing volatility as a top 5 risk in strategic IT planning, with 63% of EMEA CIOs stating they would support legal or regulatory intervention where abrupt model changes disrupt mission-critical systems. While software vendors increasingly favor bundled subscriptions for predictable revenue, the ruling underscores a deeper issue: trust erosion. As governments and large enterprises become more vocal about license continuity, this ruling may catalyze a global shift, forcing vendors to revisit how they balance revenue optimization with contractual and operational accountability. In a market increasingly shaped by regulatory oversight and buyer advocacy, software monetization models that ignore legacy commitments may no longer be defensible. Greyhound Standpoint. According to Greyhound Research, the Dutch verdict isn't just a jurisdictional anomaly. It represents a formal rebuke of how enterprise software monetization has decoupled from operational continuity. Vendors that revoke support for perpetual licenses or enforce rigid bundling policies without reasonable transition mechanisms risk creating a contractual choke point. For customers in regulated or public service environments, the stakes extend far beyond financial impact. They touch on risk, compliance, and service reliability. This ruling validates the rising concern among CIOs that vendor strategy can no longer operate in a vacuum. Whether in the form of legal injunctions, class action suits, or regulatory probes, buyer-led resistance to coercive licensing tactics is becoming structured, public, and repeatable. Vendors now face a binary choice: retrofit their models to respect legacy contractual expectations, or risk building their future revenue on top of contested trust. The path forward must balance fiscal ambition with platform responsibility. Greyhound Pulse. Data from the Greyhound CIO Pulse 2025 reveals that 58% of enterprise CIOs globally now list licensing instability and vendor unpredictability as a core risk in strategic vendor assessments. This concern escalates within EMEA, where 63% of CIOs say they would support formalized legal action if abrupt licensing changes threaten mission-critical operations or bypass established procurement norms. Notably, 34% of CIOs across public services, telecom, and BFSI sectors report that licensing transitions, particularly those involving forced bundling or deactivation of legacy entitlements, have already triggered board-level escalations. Among this cohort, 46% have initiated platform diversification to limit future exposure to unilateral vendor decisions. A consistent pattern is emerging. What began as isolated dissatisfaction is coalescing into coordinated pressure. CIOs now expect vendors to provide contractually bound transition paths and view one-size-fits-all pricing enforcement as incompatible with enterprise-grade continuity standards. Greyhound Fieldnote. Per a recent Greyhound Fieldnote developed from advisory simulations with global enterprise IT leaders, we've observed a consistent risk trajectory. When a software vendor enforces a sudden licensing model transition, especially from perpetual entitlements to bundled subscriptions, without migration support or commercial equivalence, it typically triggers a sequence of governance alarms. For example, if a public sector entity running essential citizen services is denied continued support unless it adopts an expanded licensing footprint, internal legal and procurement teams may escalate the issue to judicial or regulatory channels. In such scenarios, litigation is no longer viewed as a reputational hazard. It is repositioned as operational safeguard. Equally, in regulated industries like insurance or critical infrastructure, the bundling of unused components under one uniform model often initiates platform migration evaluations, regardless of sunk cost. These simulations reinforce a crucial insight. When software licensing strategy shifts without contractual symmetry or support flexibility, buyers no longer treat it as commercial posturing. They interpret it as a structural risk to enterprise control. The market is responding accordingly, with continuity now emerging as a non-negotiable clause in large-scale software negotiations. Analyst in focus, Sanchit Gogia. Sanchit Gogia, or SVG as he is popularly known, is a globally recognized technology analyst, innovation strategist, digital consultant, and board advisor. SVG is the chief analyst, founder and CEO of Greyhound Research, a global, award-winning technology research, advisory, consulting, and education firm. Greyhound Research works closely with global organizations, their CIOs, and the board of directors on technology and digital transformation decisions. SVG is also the founder and CEO of the House of Greyhound, an eclectic venture focusing on interdisciplinary innovation. Copyright policy. All content contained on the Greyhound Research website is protected by copyright law and may not be reproduced, distributed, transmitted, displayed, published, or broadcast without the prior written permission of Greyhound Research or, in the case of third-party materials, the prior written consent of the copyright owner of that content. You may not alter, delete, obscure, or conceal any trademark, copyright, or other notice appearing in any Greyhound Research content. We request our readers not to copy Greyhound Research content and not republish or redistribute them, in whole or partially, via emails or republishing them in any media, including websites, newsletters, or intranets. We understand that you may want to share this content with others, so we've added tools under each content piece that allow you to share the content. If you have any questions, please get in touch with our community relations team at connect@thoffer.com.